When a loved one dies because of negligence, often caused by a motor vehicle collision, a pedestrian being struck by a motor vehicle, lack of construction site safety, or because of improper medical care by a physician or a hospital, family members may seek the assistance of an attorney. A lawsuit called a wrongful death action is brought against the individuals or entities responsible for the victim's death. The lawsuit seeks compensation for the losses suffered by the surviving family members of the deceased person. To succeed in a wrongful death lawsuit, it must be established that the person or entity being sued was negligent, and the death resulted from that negligence. The family members must also demonstrate that they have suffered a loss, or as the law phrases it, damages because of their loved one's death. The law of damages varies from state to state. Examples of damages that may be sought in a wrongful death lawsuit include funeral and burial expenses, medical bills, and lost wages or income. You might be asking, what about damages for losing the deceased person's companionship, love, and support, or the loss of parental nurture and guidance? New York State has an antiquated law enacted in 1847 known as the Wrongful Death Act, which only compensates for what the law calls pecuniary loss. The law as it presently exists only allows for compensation or damages for loss of income, for the loss of guidance and support a parent provides to a child, and the extra expenses that the next of kin must now bear because of the death. A spouse and children can seek damages for losing income and support, which can be shown by the wage earnings and job benefits of the deceased loved one, and the potential for increased earnings and benefits if they didn't pass away. Children can seek damages for losing the guidance and parental nature their mother or father provided to them. Damages for the assistance the deceased family member provided to his or her spouse, children, and even grandchildren can be recovered in the lawsuit. But current law in New York fails to compensate for the emotional suffering and emotional loss for the wrongful death of a loved one. New York's antiquated and unjust law unfairly discriminates against children, the elderly, low-wage earners, and families who seek compensation for wrongful death because it only considers economic consequences. New York law fails to consider the loss to a family of a low-wage earner, someone who has not worked like a child, someone who is retired or no longer works, or a stay-at-home parent. This disregards and dismisses all other value an individual has to his or her family. 41 states have amended their wrongful death laws to acknowledge, accept, and include emotional loss. New York's law has not been updated to recognize the true value of life in a family. Loss should no longer be measured by archaic notions of breadwinners and their dependents. In the last session of the New York State Legislature, a measure was overwhelmingly passed entitled the Grieving Families Act to rectify these inequities. Unfortunately, the legislation was vetoed by Governor Hochul. The Grieving Families Act has been reintroduced in this legislative session. Please contact your legislators and ask them to again vote for a modern law which will bring New York up to the 21st century conception of the value of life, and in concert and agreement with most states in the country. Ask Governor Hochul to sign a law which would allow courts to consider emotional loss and grief when compensating bereaved family members who have lost a loved one due to negligence. Ask Governor Hochul to sign a law which would broaden the definition of family members eligible for compensation and recognize the different families and relationships that exist in the 21st century. In New York, Loving families come in all shapes and sizes, and they all deserve the same rights under the law. Please remember the laws about wrongful death damages vary by jurisdiction. So consult with an experienced attorney familiar with the laws in your area if you are considering bringing a wrongful death lawsuit. Thanks for listening.